this talk is a little shaped on my perspective about longevity, because for me, longevity is kind of establishing, what are your goals and objectives, kind of understanding where you are relative to those goals and objectives, identifying gaps, and then course correcting. So to me, it's what I try to communicate to people who are kind of in this space and interested in longevity is know your numbers, because that's the best way you're going to be able to reshape your future. Next slide. A little bit about me. I'm a little bit different in this space, and then I'm a tech entrepreneur who's just kind of gotten into the health and wellness area as a personal interest. I'm a longtime athlete, master's athlete, and have been CrossFitting for about 15 years. Just gotten into it. Was looking a couple years ago, was looking to start a new company, looking to get into something new, had always wanted to get into health and wellness. And just kind of stumbled onto the DEXA scan and DEXA Fit and kind of diagnostic opportunity. And so here we are, and this is kind of my family here on a recent trip to India.
Wow.
Part of being into longevity is making sure that I personally am around as they get older. Cool. Next slide. So I got into this space and into the DEXA Fit, area, thinking that, I get a lot of fitness athlete types coming in, trying to understand their numbers, whether it's body composition or VO2 max, et cetera. And interestingly enough, the people who've come into, my clinic are women, mostly women between the ages of 45 and 60, really trying to get a feel for, they are all interested in health, wellness, longevity. They understand their body has changed, and they're trying to figure out what to do about it. And so, that's kind of what I see. And what I'm finding is it's true for anybody, whether it's male or female, whether you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, everyone's felt something. This is not my body is kind of what I hear time and again. This is, it's not necessarily has been a dramatic change, but it's a subtle change, and people are beginning to notice, and they're a little frustrated and want to figure out, what they can do about it. Next slide. Next slide, Tony. So the fact of the matter is, a lot has changed. As we get older, our hormones change, whether you're male or female. It's either, your testosterone levels have changed if you're a male. If you're female, inevitably your estrogen levels change, and that has all sorts of implications, particularly when it comes to sleep patterns. And then as sleep changes, that invariably impacts your visceral fat, your body fat. So your body composition changes, and then as your body composition changes, well, your metabolism changes. So it's a cascade of things that come into play. Next slide. The other thing I hear a lot is people come in and I think there's a general recognition that you're not trying to go back to where you were in your 20s and 30s. You're really trying to establish a new normal for yourself that feels good and that puts you on a track, the track you want to get to, which, for most people is, I want to live a long, healthy life. I want to increase my health span. So that's the objective here. We're not trying to go back, but we're trying to go forward in some new way. Next slide. The other thing I find is that, it's not like people who come in are lazy. It's not like they're not trying to find a new normal for themselves. They're walking, they're working out, they're watching what they eat, they're experimenting with new diets, they're trying harder. But, effort's not the problem. It's really moving or applying that effort in the right areas. Next slide. And, one thing that comes out is there's no single answer. There's no magic bullet. Uh, everyone is in a slightly different place. Everyone's bodies are different. And so really you can't guess. There's no magic bullet. Really what you need to do is find a solution that works for yourself. Next slide. And to me, this personalized solution really is going to come about by understanding where your baselines are, because baselines are going to identify where you are, where you need to be, and it helps you make a plan. Next slide. So, the question is, well, what should you be measuring? And so, we always, all of us go to, or we always have, most of us anyway, have our regular checkups with our physicians, and there's a standard set of tests that people go, people that your physician will order for you. I think those are all useful, necessary, but I don't think they're sufficient. I don't think they're really measuring what you need to be measuring or what you could be measuring. And so I've thrown a few things here that we focus in on in our location. That'd be the DEXA scan, your resting metabolic rate test, VO2 max test. Certainly things like blood panels are important, but also things like grip strength, measuring grip strength, measuring your mobility, your range of motion, measuring your respiratory function. These are all things that are important, that gives you insight into yourself. It establishes a baseline for yourself so that as you move forward, over the next several years, you can understand what's changing on you. Where are you, in fact, losing performance, etc. So the next few slides, I'll kind of go over where each of these, I'll give you a little bit more specificity on what we're measuring and what you can get out of it. Next slide. So kind of the bread and butter test I believe in right now is the body composition test, the DEXA scan. Stephanie, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the DEXA scan, if you've had a DEXA scan done, but really it is the gold standard for body composition. It's about a 10-minute scan. It's based on super low density X-rays. So it's equivalent, the amount of X-ray radiation you're exposed to is the equivalent of what you would get in a flight from the West Coast to the East Coast. So barely anything at all. As I said, it's about a 10-minute scan. What you get out of it is bone density information. For females, that's particularly important. But you also get body fat, visceral fat, and lean mass information. Very critical. So visceral fat, as you know, is kind of that internal fat that's surrounding your vital organs, like your liver, pancreas, etc. It's metabolically active. Visceral fat's metabolically active, so it secretes things like cortisol, etc., which are inflammatory in nature. And so, you really want to get a handle on where you are from a visceral fat perspective. For almost everybody, we want to be about a pound or less, you want to have about a pound or less of visceral fat. And if you have more than that, well, it's important and incumbent upon us to kind of modify your diet and your lifestyle to kind of drive that visceral fat down. To me, beyond the visceral fat, having an adequate amount of lean mass is highly critical. Lean mass meaning muscle mass, because as we age, we all lose muscle mass. And, I think it's kind of obvious that muscle mass is critical for longevity, right? You want to be able to move, you want to be able to function at an adequate level. And to do that, you need an adequate amount of muscle mass. And if you think about it, that, for men, as an example, we lose about 10% of our muscle mass per decade after the age of 45. So, that's like 1 or 2% per year. You want to make sure that you're starting off with a fair amount of muscle mass, because you're going to lose some. You better have enough to start. It's like, it's like saving for your retirement. You got to have enough, because you're going to be drawing down on that, on that savings over time. Similar level of lean mass loss is there for females as well. So those are things kind of understanding excuse me, understanding where you are along those different vectors is pretty critical, because what I always tell people: come back in a year or two, and make sure, let's say from a lean mass perspective, that you haven't lost too much. For females in particular, make sure that your bone density is kind of roughly the same, because you want to make sure. And if that's not the case, that gives you an opportunity to course correct, right? Let's say you've lost a little bit of bone density in a year or two between DEXA scans. Well, one, whatever you've been doing isn't working. Secondly, you can begin to incorporate things like resistance training, maybe modify your diet a little bit to minimize that bone loss. So again, going back to hormones change, our bodies change, etc. We are fighting an uphill battle as we get older, and as we strive for longevity and health span. But there are things you can do to minimize whatever long-term loss we're going to experience. Next slide.
A couple questions, just
sure.
So your lean mass, is that just a calculation of your total mass minus your body fat, using your body fat percentage? Are there bones included or no, I guess is the question.
Yeah, great question. So the way a DEXA scan works, it's called a 3-component system. So what it is able to accurately identify bone mass in your body. It's able to accurately identify body fat in your body. And then whatever's left over is considered lean mass. So yeah, indirectly, you are correct. So one of the things in terms of muscle mass metrics that's pretty critical is, as I said, the DEXA scan, it's bone mass, it's body fat, and then it's whatever's left over is called lean mass. There's a particular metric called the appendicular lean mass index, ALMI, which basically says how much lean mass do you have in your arms and your legs relative to your height. And the reason that metric is important is when you think about, your arms and your legs, they don't have, so lean mass effectively then turns out to be organs, muscle mass, connection, any water weight. Bit of a catch-all to your point, Tony. But when you think about what's in your arms and your legs, there's no organs, very little connective tissue, very little water weight. So ALMI is a pretty good muscle mass metric that comes out of the DEXA scan. So that's typically what I point individuals to, is like focus in on your ALMI, not your lean mass numbers per se, but let's look at your ALMI and let's make sure that you're at the 50th percentile or greater.
Oh, great. Gives you reading the percentile so you can understand
exactly. It. Right. There've been studies out there for 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 individuals, and kind of Pareto those, and so you want to be, so there's pretty well defined metrics that to show you where you are relative to the general population.
Great. And then a second question, since we're on the slide, but yeah. So bone density, how quickly can that be changed with either supplements or resistance training or other things?
Yeah. Much like, so let's take a step back. Bone density and overall bone health is established in your youth, quite frankly. Your bone density increases throughout your teens and 20s and peaks in your early 30s. And so, beyond that, it plateaus in your 30s. And then for females, you'll have a fairly significant loss starting in, your perimenopausal years. For men, it's still a loss, but not that dramatic. So the frank answer is there's not a lot you can do to improve bone density, once you're in your 40s. The best you're going to do is to maintain. Okay. And that's important to kind of understand. Now, I think that being said, there are some pharmaceutical interventions that can improve bone density for those individuals who might be, osteoporotic. But for most individuals, your you're doing pretty well if you maintain your bone density. Similarly, you're doing pretty well if you can increase or maintain your muscle mass once you get past the age of 50.
For sure. So thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Happy to, yeah, we can just keep this informal. The other kind of main test that I suggest to a lot of individuals is, kind of understanding where you are from a resting metabolic rate perspective. So resting metabolic rate establishes the the baseline caloric expenditure for your body if you did nothing at all. And so you do this, it's about a 15-minute test. Typically what's done is you have a mask on you. We're measuring how much oxygen you're consuming and the amount of carbon dioxide you produce as a result. The ratio of carbon dioxide output to oxygen input really establishes your caloric expenditure. And then from there, you're going to tack on, your some basic physiological activity and any exercise. And that, for most individuals, will give you, typically your resting metabolic rate's about 65 to 70% of your overall baseline caloric expenditure during the day, depending on the level of activity, the level of exercise and activity that you undergo. But that gives you an idea of where you need to be from a body weight maintenance perspective.
Great. No, that makes sense. So a couple questions on this, because this is really interesting. So then your wearable and calculation their metrics on your resting metabolic rate are kind of just guesses, sort of like their VO2 max.
Correct. Yeah. So what most of those would do is there's, as you can imagine, there's a lot of research in this area. And so they're going to take your height, your weight, your age, and an estimate of your activity, and then extrapolate from there and give you an estimate of what your caloric expenditure is. From an accuracy perspective, they're going to give you they're going to give you something within the ballpark, for sure. But sometimes ballpark, for certain individuals, the ballpark's not good enough. And here's kind of one reason why. One of the things that I've noticed is for individuals, and obviously a lot of people out there are on GLP-1s or other weight loss drugs. What I've noticed is that if you lose more than 2 pounds a month, so a half a pound a week, which represents approximately a 200 calorie deficit. If you lose more than 2 pounds a month, you're eating into your lean mass. So I've had people, and we've had thousands of people come in, and I've noticed this. That's kind of the sweet spot. So if you're off and you're at a 500 calorie deficit, invariably you're going to be eating into your lean mass. Now, for some individuals, that may be okay. But for a lot of people, they don't have enough lean mass to afford to lose that much. And so that's kind of where, specificity and accuracy is critical.
Right on. Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide. So the other test that I think is important, and I think this is one that gets a lot of airplay right now, is the VO2 max. And there's a lot of buzz out there that it is the number one predictor of longevity. I'm not sure I believe that, but nonetheless, I think it is a good metric to understand. I think more importantly, the VO2 max test reveals an individual's personalized heart rate zones. So if you've heard of zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, etc. And the reason that's important is, again, for a lot of individuals, operating and sustaining, their exercise intensity in the zone 2 helps them reduce body fat, because zone 2 is the zone in which your body is metabolizing fat as its energy source during that exercise period. And so, again, if you want to reduce your visceral fat, if you want to reduce your body fat, and you're out there and you're on a treadmill, you want to make sure that you're in zone 2. And let me take a step back. Counterintuitively, the more intense your exercise is, and you probably know this, Tony, the more intense your exercise is, the more you deviate away from metabolizing fat as your energy source, and you move towards metabolizing carbohydrates. So, if you're on a treadmill for 45 minutes and you're going hard, and you're thinking you're getting a great workout, you are, and all sorts of benefits to doing that, but you're not necessarily metabolizing fat. You're not reducing your body fat. You're not reducing your visceral fat. You're doing lots of good things, but that's not it. That's not one of them. And so a lot of people, I'm a big believer in trying to get 180 minutes a week of zone 2 cardio. But, if you're going to do that, if you're going to spend 45 minutes on a treadmill, let's make sure you're metabolizing fat.
Mm-hmm.
And then going back to your point about, Tony, about the wearables, that's another area where, in particular, the wearables will be inaccurate. I can almost guarantee, Tony, for you, your wearable's not going to accurately represent your zone 2. What they will typically do is use the standard formula of 220 minus your age to establish, your max heart rate, and then drop from there, roughly 65% to get to your zone 2. And again, broad brushstroke across the general population, that's okay. But for most people, that's not. And then so, all you need to do is bump up a little bit higher. And if you're actually in zone 3, now you're not metabolizing, again, if that's your goal.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. That's what I've noticed with the wearables too, with my situation just being an outlier there. One other maybe question too, and this is for people listening too afterwards. So that what you're saying means that zone 2 can be different for different people.
Correct.
And I've heard that a good way to just guesstimate zone 2 is you're sort of doing cardio, but you can still hold a conversation. Is that kind of right?
Yeah, yes, I 100% agree. What I tell individuals and what I do myself is to make sure I can breathe through my nose, nasal breathing. And what you want to do is you want to get your intensity up so that it's beginning to get difficult. You can do it for 30 to 45 minutes, but it's getting tough.
Okay.
And I also think nasal breathing has all sorts of other benefits. That's a topic for another day. But but nonetheless, yeah, I think you're right. The two rough metrics that I like to use is nasal breathing and what you say. Can you carry on a conversation with the person next to you, or a buddy on the phone? And you need to be able to have that conversation, but they need to know that you're doing something.
Okay, good. That's good. Stephanie has a question.
Yeah. So, okay. So I run daily, and I breathe in through my nose, out through my mouth, and I understand that if my wearable was working right, that would track. It does track calories and output. But last night I did not a gentle yoga, but I wasn't huffing and puffing. And my question is, from what you said, I could carry on a conversation. It was intense, like for the muscle movement. Is that zone 2? I'll tell you, my wearable thought I was sleeping because it recorded the same amount of burn as me sitting here typing away, doing nothing, as my 30-minute yoga.
Right. I think the issue with things like yoga, again, tremendous benefits to it, and I'm a big advocate. But it's not the sustained activity, right? As you go through your movements, you have this period of rest. So I think if you were thinking about your heart rate's going to fluctuate up and down, and I think that's going to take you in and out of zone 2. So, I mean, I tend to, and it's the same thing with, if you go for a walk, it's great, but if you're, depending on where you're walking, if you're stopping every, couple minutes because you're at a stoplight or a crosswalk or whatever, you're not necessarily getting the full benefit. Again, all sorts of great things about being outside and fresh air and the walking. Are you getting the full, it's really a matter of, are you getting the full zone 2 benefit of that 45 minutes or an hour or whatever? And the answer is likely not when you're doing yoga, in terms of fully metabolizing fat during that entire period of time, or said another way, maximally metabolizing fat during that hour. That's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah.
You want to be at a high enough intensity that you're really maximally burning fat during that time period, not too intense to where you're shifting away from burning fat to burning carbohydrates. So it's kind of like this sweet spot that you need to be in. And in fact, there's a term for it called fat max. You want to be in this fat max zone, which is kind of, about 3/4 of the way into your zone 2. Great. The other thing that I like to focus individuals on is grip strength. Chris, when we think about health span and longevity, there's a lot of talk about, well, project forward about what kinds of things you want to be able to do. And when you think about it, I think almost everybody said, well, I want to travel. And I always say, well, when you want to travel in the future, let's say when you're 80 years old, you want to be able to carry your bags. And so if you want to carry 2 20-pound bags, when you're 80, well, you better be able to carry, 2 50-pound kettlebells now. And so I'm a big believer in, kind of measuring your grip strength, focusing in on your farmer's carries, because it's not just about your hands. It's not just about your grip. It's really, your grip is kind of an indication of your overall fitness levels, whether it's your legs, whether it's your, certainly your forearms, but also your traps, etc. So measuring your grip strength, kind of understanding where you are. Now, that's something you can work on and improve, and it has long-term benefits for you. Range of motion, gait analysis, balance, these are all things that kind of understand where you are now, because those are things that that do drop off over time. One of the things that that individuals are beginning, or researchers are beginning to find right now, is that well before the actual balance symptoms show up, where you have trouble walking and those kinds of things, you'll begin to notice differences in your, subtle differences in your balance, subtle differences in your range of motion. And so try and get in front of that, trying to understand that, hey, I'm losing a little something now, and doing things early on to improve it is going to pay dividends long term. Next slide. Heart rate variability is actually another one that's quite interesting. Kind of get a feel for where you are from a parasympathetic versus sympathetic perspective. Again, like I said, it's a window into your nervous system, gives you a feel for where you are today, but I think just kind of understanding what your baseline is important. Any questions?
Have you seen differences in people that are on GLP-1s with HRV?
That's a great question. Actually, no, I haven't. I haven't even thought about it. That's actually a good question.
And then, well, I'll tell you my own experiences, and I've been just diving into this because my numbers are drastically changing because of GLP-1s. I mean, it could be some other factors, but since I started, they've gone from like a 26 to like a 7 or 8, and a slow, gradual, steady decline.
Interesting.
Right. Even though my workouts have gone up, I'm doing 3 hours of zone 2 a day on average. And my recovery feels fine. It's improved, I would say. I'm able to do hit multiple hours 2 days in a row, which was rare for me before. We'll call it a lot of other peptides too that are more recovery based. So yeah, the HRV was one of the weirdest metrics because it changed so drastically. It was telling me I wasn't recovered, but I felt wonderful.
In a counterintuitive way as well.
In a counterintuitive way. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if that'll change. I mean, I'm cycling off, the GLP-1s now. Yeah. So the next month or two, I'll know some more. But my other question, maybe related to it, is it sounds like HRV is an individual variable. What matters is how it changes, not necessarily. It's not like heart rate where there is a rate.
Universal. Where are you? Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. HRV is kind of a personal metric, if you will, that you want to understand where you are. And more importantly, I think you want to understand how your lifestyle decisions are impacting your HRV. Like, what is stressing you out? What is flattening your HRV? What is depressing it? Like, those kinds of things are important insights because, you do want to be able to recover. You want to have a good parasympathetic tone, and understanding what types of things are suppressing it is just, again, adding, providing you with some insights.
Cool.
I have a question on,
sure.
On the HRV. Let me put my speaker on this side. Again, new to this Fitbit Air. Mine probably doesn't, it only has like a week of data, but so I had my resting heart rate, which was like 60, but my HRV was also a number. So how, I was trying to put it in terms of what your chart was saying with 1 second. Is it a single number?
Yeah, it's a single number. Well, depending on the device and how it's calculated, sometimes it's a number between 0 and 100. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to get your heart rate up as high as, or your HRV up as high as possible.
Okay.
And so the wearables, typically accurate HRV, to get an accurate HRV result, you want a heart rate monitor, something that's strapped on. And you typically want to take it, I would say first thing in the morning. Do a 2 to 5 minute reading first thing in the morning. And I don't know that you necessarily need to do it every day, but a couple of days a week, maybe 3 days a week is probably adequate, just to get a snapshot of where you are and where things are. I think that the wrist-worn wearables, I personally wouldn't put a lot of stock into them. They're not very accurate at all. And the one thing I meant to mention earlier, Tony, in response to one of your questions, not only are the wearables, kind of estimating your zone 2, your wearables, in particular your wrist-worn wearables, are not particularly accurate when it comes to heart rate. They're good, but they're not particularly accurate. So there's a couple layers of potential inaccuracies there that could throw you off. Again, good for, certainly better than nothing. But there are a couple areas where they're not going to be 100% accurate.
That's great. Very.
And this is something new that I'm beginning to bring into our operation. That's kind of measuring using a spirometer to measure lung function. Because I think that what I'm beginning to see, or I speculate anyway, is with the preponderance of respiratory infections and illnesses out there, that I believe people are losing lung function and lung capacity over time, whether it's COVID, whether it's RSV, etc. But we don't know, because no one ever measures your lung function. And it's a pretty simple, 30-second test to get you some good information. And I think that What we're beginning to do is have people come in, measure their respiratory function, their lung capacity, et cetera. The other thing that we're able to do is with this information, we can understand in conjunction with, let's say, the resting metabolic rate test, where they're just resting and breathing in and out, we can understand if you're truly breathing deeply and effectively. What are your breathing mechanics? Because if you're a shallow breather, you're likely to be, your sympathetic tone is going to increase. It's going to increase your overall stress level. It's going to increase your overall blood pressure. It's going to decrease your HRV. So breathing mechanics and breathing efficiency are critical. And so, again, understanding where you are, and a lot of people don't know it. A lot of people are chest breathers as opposed to belly breathers. And you really do want to be a belly breather, because that's the most effective way of balancing out your parasympathetic and sympathetic tones. So, but we don't know that. But these are simple tests that you can run.
And how is this test different from the resting metabolic rate test and the VO2 max, the mechanics of it?
Great question. So this is just, it's a little gizmo like it shows in this picture, and you're just breathing into it. You're taking anywhere from 3 to 5 forceful breaths, and we're measuring the power of your lungs. You're taking you're inhaling and you're exhaling as forcefully as you can. And what we're doing is measuring your overall lung capacity and the force with which you can breathe out.
Okay.
And then, then when you're doing your resting metabolic rate test, we're measuring how much you're breathing in and out on a regular basis. And, you want to be around, certain percentage of your overall capacity. And a lot of people are nowhere near that. They may be at 20% of their overall capacity. So they're just shallow breathing very rapidly, right? And what you want to be is you want to be at anywhere from 6 to 12 breaths per minute at rest. And a lot of people are at like, 15, 16, 17, 18, very shallow, rapid breathing, which is not the healthiest.
It's great.
Yeah. So this is, this is kind of again, a quick overview of some of the things that you can easily measure, that give you some insights into yourself, that allow you to kind of course correct, create a plan, and set yourself up for optimal health span.
Cool. This was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
How much do these DEXA scans run? Like if you were to go to a clinic and get one?
Yeah. I mean, typically they're, about $150 roughly.
Oh.
Yeah. So all these tests are
like 1,000, but yeah.
No. These things are, so that's the other thing too. Like we're at a point now where a lot of these tests and the resulting information are easily accessible.
Huh.
Most of this for us, all these tests are HSA, FSA eligible. So, people have an HSA or FSA account, they can use that to pay for this. Most, various DEXA-fits, and, DEXA-fit's not the only company out there doing DEXA scans. There are a number of other DEXA scans or DEXA scan companies out there. So very accessible.
Are there different types of DEXA scans for different things? Because I feel like I've seen some commercials for where they detect cancers, or are there different levels?
Yeah. So there's only one DEXA scan, and it's based on low density X-ray. It does not do cancer screening. Those are typically whole body MRIs that people are starting to talk about there. The DEXA scan itself is used in two different ways. The first way, which I've been talking about, is whole body composition. And so as part of that, you get bone density, body fat, visceral fat, lean mass information. The traditional way DEXA scans have been used is for osteoporosis diagnosis. And for that, it's the same machine, it's the same scanner. The difference is for an osteoporosis diagnosis, you want to measure specific sites. You're either going to measure the hip, the lumbar spine, or the forearm. Those are specific regions that are scanned. And so it's kind of you're zooming in on those particular areas. And then the result that comes out is used by the physician to diagnose either osteoporosis or osteopenia. The scans I'm talking about here, and in those scans, you're not going to get body fat and muscle mass information. You're just going to get a bone density number. But for this scan, it's kind of overall body. You can get an overall bone density, overall bone density numbers, which help you directionally. Right. If we see an issue there, then you'll know, and then you can, people can, if there's an issue that's identified, they can then go have that osteoporosis specific scan done.
Thank you.